Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Collin County's program, Tips on Writing Letters to the Editor. I'm Sharon Hirsch, Program Vice President for the Collin County League. At our annual meeting, when we determined our 2022-23 program priority, members voted to focus on the Making Democracy Work campaign of the LWV-US. This campaign consists of these focus areas: voting rights, improving elections, campaign finance and money in politics, redistricting, and direct election of the president. The lineup of events that I proposed to the board for the current year all embrace topics that intersect with a functioning democracy, and today's topic is no exception. I will be asking our guest speaker a number of prepared questions. However, if we have additional time, we will pose questions from the audience. So please submit your questions via the chat feature, and we'll try to get to those later on in the program. So today we're pleased to welcome Deborah Fleck, letters editor for the Dallas Morning News. Deborah started working in journalism during college at ABC News in Washington, D.C. as a teleprompter. After graduating from Georgetown University, she got a job at the Washington Post as a news clerk in the style section. Then she moved over to the International Herald Tribune desk as an editorial aide. She has had stories published in both papers. She moved to Dallas in 1982 and worked weekends at the Dallas Times-Herald for about a year. In 2000, she started at the Dallas Morning News, where she worked in Metro and wrote a community column about Irving for Neighbors Go and the Asian Culture and Community column for Metro. She was also content coordinator for community news for Metro. She retired in 2018, but works on contract for the paper as letters editor. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my tips on writing a letter to the editor.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we'll get started. You've had such a diverse and interesting experience in the news industry. What have been the most impactful, gratifying, or exciting experiences you've had during your career?
There have been many experiences that have been gratifying, but I think the most is getting to meet people who make a difference in their communities and the leaders who make a difference. I've been able to meet people from a range of levels, such as, the ambassadors to some of the Asian countries who've come into Dallas, and I've gotten to interview them, to leaders in the arts communities, to leaders just in the local communities as well. And I think the opportunity to meet people, to get to know them, and to write about them has been very rewarding. And journalism offers that. It's sad in a way that the industry is under so much fire, and that it is that especially the print papers are shrinking in content, because the wealth of information they offer and the way they can unite everybody is really invaluable. So for the contact with people has been my most rewarding experience.
Oh, that's great. What role do you believe the letters section of the paper plays in our democracy?
It plays an important role because by sharing opinions, offering solutions to problems, and contributing to the community discourse is invaluable, because too often we don't know everything about an issue, and when you're receiving another perspective, enriches your experience and enriches your knowledge. And I think there's a book I mentioned in one of my other talks about the letters, called Civic Hope: How Ordinary Americans Keep Democracy Alive. And it's written by Rod Hart, who was at UT. And he said that he wanted to learn, it was all about letter writers, and he wanted to learn what they were thinking about their government and their communities in their own voices. And so he analyzed over 10,000 letters. And I think he ended up feeling that, democracy is saved somewhat by having voices expressed through letters to the editor.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to share something with you on that point, because I have always subscribed to a local newspaper I feel it's just so important that we are in touch with what's going on in our community. And recently, you published a letter from an acquaintance of mine, and she had kind of a beef with the new HEB store in Plano. And she said, since the store opened, there was a lot of trash in that area. And she called out HEB and said, like, hey, HEB, what are you going to do about that? And it seemed like maybe a little thing that a lot of people probably wouldn't have paid attention to, but she did. And then Monday, I saw that she had posted on her social media a response from HEB via their social media that had shown their management company, their management committee gets together every week, and they were picking up the trash in the area. So her comment made a direct impact. Her letter made a direct impact on that business's policy.
That's funny you mentioned that, because is that Irma?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
She wrote a follow-up letter, and it's running Saturday in our 3 Cheers section, and it's thanking the groups who did that. And she goes, little did I know my letter would make such an impact. So she's having another letter running on Saturday in the 3 Cheers section. But that happens fairly often. There was one woman who wrote about missing, she couldn't find her favorite food, snack food, Fritos. And she wrote a letter about that. And then the company contacted us and wanted to get her info so they could send her some. So even something like that, it's just, you never know the impact that you'll create in the community, and who's reading the letters, and who will respond, and who will make a difference.
Right. I think that's so great. Educating the community, impacting public opinion, advocating for issues, proposing ideas, all sorts of things, not just being mad about something, right?
Right. I mean, there's many complaints. Yes.
Exactly. Would you share for our participants what the guidelines are for submitting a letter to the Dallas Morning News?
There's basically 3 tips it's pretty basic. It's the first part is to state your opinion. Number 2 is offer several arguments or points of view to make your case, which can include research, data, or other evidence. And then the third thing is to offer what you think should be done, a solution, because some do have opinions about what should be done instead of what is being done. Preferred letters are to the point, constructive, and add to the communal dialogue. We avoid letters that do any name calling and that are hateful in tone, which because of politics now, that happens a little bit more than usual. And we also, letters that offer unfair criticism. We do, sometimes we'll get letters that criticize our editorials and op-eds, and we have to be careful there because, those opinions, we can't just have it be where there's some that just attack without really having the data to back it up, or the research. So those sometimes won't make it, but we fact check every letter. But if writers can include sources or even a link, that helps our process to get the letter published. So it's, those kind of things to keep in mind will help a letter get published.
That's great. Do you need to go through the online portal when you're submitting? Is that the only way to do that now?
That's the preferred way, but we do have a letters email, which is letters@dallasnews.com, that some people could use because they've had trouble with the form. So I do accept letters that way. So those are the 2 main ways. The letters should be 200 to 250 words, but many are longer. And I'm not sure how that form works, in the sense, sometimes people get long, more words in there. But I tell readers, if they have a strong letter and it's a little longer, to use a second form and send the rest of it and say, this follows up to my previous letter. And sometimes I can consider those if they're not super long. And so you could do that to get around the limitations set up by the form. The one reason we do sometimes have a longer letter in there is if the editor, who I report to, Rudy Bush, sends me a letter that he wants to get in, usually from a higher level official or the head of a company or an organization who want to clarify something about that they were mentioned in the paper. Like John Cornyn does this often. He'll send a rebuttal to either an op-ed or a news story. And if they're longer, sometimes that group gets a little bit longer for their letters. I mean, there's exceptions made, but rarely. And that's hurts me in a way, because then others write in and say, you gave him so much space, why can't I have that? And so it's not that often, but we can extend them a little bit from that major limit of about 250 words.
And then do you ever do any editing to the article? And if you do edit the letter, would you notify the person who submitted it?
I actually do. We do editing for clarity, grammar, and space. If it's too long, we may have to cut a graph or so. If it's a major edit, I will check with the writer and say, we want to change this to say this, or delete this sentence, and check with them. And they almost always agree, because they're usually so happy to be considered. We try not to change the writer's voice, but so the editing, isn't, that heavy, but it is edited because of grammar, in grammar cases, and clarity. So there is editing by me, but I'm not the only one. Then it goes to the copy desk. And we have a pretty strong copy desk that's handled editorial for a while, and they make their changes. And then the third layer, it goes through 3 layers, is the main editors. It's Rudy Bush or his assistant, who will triple proof the letters and the whole editorial page. So there's a lot of editing involved.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that there was that much of a process to it, that you weren't just saying, let's just go with this one or whatever. And I do appreciate that a lot. Do you prioritize letters that refer to things that have been published in the paper, not just some random topic that somebody comes up with, or, does that make any difference whatsoever?
Not really. It doesn't make a difference. The ones that refer to articles in the paper, do get in more often, only because sometimes there's so many letters on that topic, like on an op-ed, for instance. Like last Sunday, we had a long editorial on the American Middle about the news media. And there were over 10 or so letters on that topic. And so that's going to run as a topic letters feature on Sunday. So we do get a lot that refer to the articles, op-eds, letters, editorials. I like it when they refer to letters, because that shows me people are reading the letters, but others as well are welcome. So there's some that are, just on a general topic, like, trash in my city, or, something that's the local tie-ins are the best, because local news doesn't get a lot of coverage. So when there's articles about Dallas or Collin County or Plano, or, cities that we don't get to cover a lot, I try to run those and give that community a little voice. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought up that the weekend part paper as well, because isn't it on Sunday where you have a bigger section, and do you pick a particular topic for that in advance? Or
yes, usually like on Monday, I get a lot of letters over the weekend, and I stop really on Friday morning looking at them, because we finish sending them over by Friday at noon. And so I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday letters in there, and I'll look, and Monday. And so I'll look to see what if there's, several on one topic, and that's what I'll choose for the following Sunday. And it varies, based on what I receive. So this Sunday, it will be on the American Middle editorial, because we received over 24 letters on that topic. And so that's basically on what comes in over the weekend is how I choose that topic.
Okay, that's great. Now, you had mentioned that you fact check.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are you looking for? Like, this is why I don't use numbers and statistics very often, because you're usually counting on wherever you got that, whatever your source was, to be accurate, right? I read this on such and such a website or whatever. So tell me what the steps are when you do the fact checking.
I always have to check numbers. Okay, so if there's dates, percentages, population statistics or any type of ratings, I have to check all those. And so sadly, if a letter has a lot of that, I will probably avoid it only because I don't have the time to go to different websites to check. And often when I do just a Google search, the answer pops up. But I check all the numbers for one, I check dates, and then I have to check also if, they say the Texas legislature did such and such legislature. I'll have to go online and check that. Or if they make a reference to a story and say so-and-so said this, I'll have to go back and check that to make sure the quote is accurate. So there's a lot of checking involved, but sometimes these things slip through, like there's going to be a correction tomorrow because somebody wrote that Barry Switzer was in the Hall of Fame. No, sorry, the Ring of Honor at Texas Stadium. And I thought he was because I had read about that. So I didn't check it. And sure enough, he's not in there. And so it was my fault initially. And then the copy desk missed it. And sometimes you read things and think you agree with the letter writer, but we have to check everything. So even that I should have checked. But the process is I check our stories first to make sure they're referring to what they refer to in the story or op-ed or editorial is correct. Then any statistics they present, numbers, and then also quotes. So it's checking quite a bit, but most letter writers will actually include a source or, be easy to check because I can pull up the story right away in our library. So it's not as time consuming as it sounds, but things slip through once in a while, but it's a process we take seriously.
Yeah, it actually sounds really time consuming to me. And that makes me want to ask you this question that I didn't have prepared before. Is like, how much time do you spend on this every day?
Well, what's interesting is I know a lot of the letter writers because I know this is one of your questions too. Many write often. There's some writers who write every day, and there's a couple writers who write 2 or 3 times a day. And I think they just love writing letters to the editor. And so once I know them, I can kind of get an idea of whether their letters are factual or not. And there's some that are excellent that I don't have to check that thoroughly. And there's others, if they write it and I consider them, I'll have to check them more. But it's, so it's not as time consuming as it sounds. I'm supposed to spend 20 to 25 hours a week. And I would say it's usually that if there's a lot of difficult letters where I do have to check a lot, it could be 30 hours a week, but it's a part-time, contract work. So I'm not there. I'm not supposed to work on it 40 hours a week.
Well, I wonder if those people who write to you frequently just want to make sure that everybody knows what they're thinking about a topic rather than them really liking to write letters or whatever, because I tend to notice the frequent letter writers and
yes,
pretty much know what their opinion on a topic is going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
They was going to say, there's one letter writer named Don Skaggs who writes every day and criticizes us. In fact, we can't run a lot of his letters because he'll call us a liberal rat. And, name calling, we just can't allow. We were trying to make it cordial. But he wrote one this week that said, I never really praise the Dallas Morning News, but I am this time because your opinion section this Sunday was wonderful. And so I thought, wow, that's great. So he gets in this week because of that. And it was more, a more cordial letter than normal. My rule is to separate them by at least a week, the same writers. And usually that works. Sometimes, if like I ran one on Monday and then he has a good one for my topic feature on Sunday, he might run on Sunday, he or she. So there's sometimes where they're a little bit closer, but I try to avoid that, at least a week or more. I think the New York Times makes them like 30 days or something, but that's because of the volume of their letters and they want a variety from across the country, really. But we get, because they write so often and some of their letters are good, they can run, within a week. I mean, after a week or two, again.
Yeah, I definitely recognize Dawn's name. I know who, and I get really excited when it's one of my friends, and I take a snapshot or something of it and make sure I send them to them, because some people get just the paper copy, and some people get just the online.
They're online. Yeah.
It's exciting when you see people that or of being published. But I was going to mention that this was back in January, early January. There was a reader who wrote in that said that you should be seeking more balance in your publication, because it appeared to him that readers have zero interest in anything remotely resembling conservative thinking and policy. Well, that made me chuckle a lot, because that's not the way I see it, right? So I think we all see everything on there through our own little lens and our own viewpoint. So do you think it's important that you seek a balance of opinions? And what happens, because we've seen this on a number of occasions where the majority of opinion is really on one side?
Yes, that is a big, it's always been very challenging for me, because the letters I receive are mostly liberal. I would say 95%, or maybe 90%, but I try to run both sides as much as I can, but the letters reflect what I receive. For instance, when we ran our editorial recommending Greg Abbott for governor, I received over 100 letters complaining about that and not agreeing with that. And the editor said, well, obviously we can't run them, that much. So we chose only a few and ran a few, but that did not reflect what we received, because we received so many that were upset with that. And so we try to calm down, the negative, those that are against some of the conservative aspects that are in the news, but they write more than the other side. And I've replied to some who've complained to me about that. And I said, we really welcome all views. We read all the letters and we try to present both sides, but if they don't, the conservatives don't write as much. And so, sometimes the ones that do are too negative, in the sense that and both sides too, they don't get in if they're saying, this side is, stupid or making mistakes and all. But what's interesting is that I think I've received a lot from Republicans who say they don't recognize their party in Texas. And so they're trying to reflect the conservative views, but they're having a hard time because they don't agree with some of the extremes in the Republican Party. So those letters I try to get in quite a bit, but and so they're kind of being more moderate in this. But overall, I think the challenge is to have more from both sides and make it more equal. But that's really hard because the letters don't come in like that.
Right. And you can't really be the mediator of these party issues or whatever, because I think like endorsements, around the election time, it just, you're either a horrible liberal paper or you're an awful conservative paper. And I have my own point of view too, so, it's always fascinating to read what people come up with in terms of how they perceive the organization.
Right. The paper.
Yeah. And it's a business and it's run by people that have their own opinions too. So you have to keep that in mind. But anyway, I was reading about your recently introduced contributing columnists. And I was just curious how these people are selected. If you give them topics to write about, and could I submit a longer op-ed?
Yes. Some letter writers, if their letter's super long, or if they write to me, personally, I'll say they are welcome to send an op-ed to the letters, the commentary editor, Ryan Sanders. Anyone is welcome to do that. He has there's an email for that. It's viewpoints@dallasnews.com. And he has a criteria for that, like, how many words and how you have to keep it in the body of an email. You can't send an attachment. He has several other rules. So anyone is welcome to do that. And for those columnists he chose, I think a lot of them submitted to us already. And he has, of course, a regular contingent that he taps. But there's a cute little story about one of his contributors. He wrote a letter to the editor that was just so clever. And Ryan said, could I reach out to him to see if he'll write columns for me? And he reached out to him. And so now he's on his list of regular contributors. And I said, you're taking my letter writer who I really like. But I think, having the chance to do columns is something I think that would be, that he's very welcome to do. So he did that one time with one of my letter writers. But it's open to anyone, the viewpoints, and they have, and Ryan's the main editor and an assistant editor.
Yeah, I think those longer op-eds stir up, more feelings, and probably you probably get more letters.
Yes, I do, because there are opinions and people react to opinions more, I think, than to the hard news. So I get a lot on the columns.
Is there a number that you try to publish it every day?
Well, I know someone asked me how many do I get, how many do I receive a day or a week? I tried to tabulate that. It varies, but about 50 letters a day and about 300 to 400 per week, because I get a few more on the weekend. When a major issue comes up, I can receive double that amount, such as the Uvalde gun accident. I mean, Uvalde massacre. Well, it is a kind of a massacre of the students. So those, I had over maybe 200 letters on gun violence in general and on Uvalde. And so the rule is, I can run them as a topic letters to get more of them in on Sunday. And I run like 2 to 3 per day and then after a few days and then stop, because, I could go on and on, but we try to limit on a certain topic. Plus, you want to get in the other topics as well. So those are rare cases, not rare cases, but those are exceptions when I receive more letters. Let's see, there's about 350 to 400 a week, I would say, total.
Do you take from the letters the pieces you put in the 3 cheers section, or is that another place to?
No, they come in the regular file, and I just pull them out from the regular submissions. And some do say this is a 3 cheers letter, and then of course I'll consider them for that section. But there are sometimes just regular letters that people are like. Well, Irma's that's running this Saturday she said, this is like the 3 cheers. I'm so happy they cleaned up the trash based on my letter. So sometimes they'll be suggested, but sometimes they'll just positive letters that I'll pull for that file.
Yeah, that was just so exciting to see that you saw, given that we were going to have this program today, and that, it was such a timely topic and response from them. And HEB's typically, very responsive. They're good community partners.
Sounds like it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we did talk. I had my question about frequent writers, and you did address that. Have you ever had to tell someone we're just not accepting?
Yes. Some write often and they're not going to work. And so, excuse me, one of them wrote to my editor, Rudy, and said, you never run my letters, blah, blah, blah. And Rudy asked me to send him some of the letters. And then he said, I understand why, I will handle it. So he had to reply to him to say, you don't meet the criteria where, you have fact-based letters, you express an opinion, you contribute to the communal dialogue. And so he will handle some of that for me. But there's a couple who really are upset that they don't get chosen more. Like, I could give you names, but I try to consider them, but if they just sometimes don't work. So that's more or less, if they do complain to that level, I will send them to the editor and Rudy will work with them.
Yeah, you want to give people a platform, but you want to be able to make sure that you can moderate the tone of that content to make sure it makes a difference. Yeah. Do you have a favorite letter?
Well, you asked me that and I thought I have many favorite letters. So I'm going to give you 3 of them to see what you think real quick. And actually, I run a lot of the favorite letters at the end of the year in our best letters of the year feature, which is the whole page on page 3P. But here's 3 that three recent ones that stood out. 2 years ago, my sisters and I started Zooming twice a week with our mother. We are spread out, Massachusetts, California, and Texas. It was important that we hear and see each other and especially connect with Mom, who's 80 years old and lives alone in her home. The first week or so of lockdown, we were nervously looking at each other on our screens, wondering, will the schools reopen next week? Maybe in early April? Our mother smiled and said, girls, this will take 2 years. We laughed at this crazy notion. Okay, Mom, whatever. The takeaway, listen to your mother. That was number one. This one is get a dog. He was referring to a tiny little news article in the News Digest in our paper. So people write about, all kinds of things in the paper, not just the editorials or the main news stories, even this little News Digest item. He goes, this very short story tells it all. A man dies in the wilderness. His dog remains by his side and is found emaciated but alive. No doubt he would have stayed until the last full measure of devotion. Grady, my dog, and I are growing old together. We are both going a little deaf with a little cloudiness in our eyes. We don't walk far now. We tire quickly and replenish slowly, but I can still tell he has the heart and is committed to never letting me down. His will to please and loyalty without question has been the hallmark of our bond. His patience with me is limitless. I fight to keep thoughts of seeing that light in his eyes dimming and extinguishing itself, but it is hard. He will be an irreplaceable loss and leave a scar deep across my heart. But until that saddest day, we will walk the shorter paths together. When he is gone, the image I will hold in my heart is of him running full across our cool green meadow through a boundless sky, looking back, waiting for me. The world is tumultuous. If you want to bring some stillness to your mind, peace to your heart, and grace to your soul, get a dog. Wow. That one was really, touching. It was a little longer, but because it was well written and expressed, his opinion in a clear way, that one got considered. And then there was a response to that letter, and it said, Moore's letter to the editor regarding his trusted dog, Grady, certainly made me tear up. What a beautifully written letter. It should be awarded the Pulitzer for best letter to the editor. So those are three that recently that were kind of favorites.
Yeah, and I do remember reading through your page with your favorite letters of.
Yeah, on Sunday. Yeah, that was actually that ran December 25th because it runs the last Sunday of the year, and that happened to be Christmas.
And do you choose all of those?
Yes.
Yeah.
While I'm working on letters during the year, I will save a couple of them into a file, and so they do go back for the entire year. They're not just the recent ones, but I get to choose those. One got killed, but that's but the rest made it because I forgot why. But so yeah, I get it. I'm able to do that.
It's like the Letters Hall of Fame or something.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool to get it published twice.
Yeah, they do get published twice, right?
Mm-hmm. I know you covered this earlier, but I want to go over it just maybe one more time, because as an advocacy group and going into the legislative session, mm-hmm. Part of our goal will be to get the word out about our positions on different issues that the legislature will face. And I'm on part of a few other organizations that are all doing the same. So just maybe the major tips, the best tips on how to get those letters published.
Well, people don't realize they can write about the issues like that and present their opinion. And also candidates don't realize they can have their supporters write in and say whether they agree or disagree with the recommendations we have. So just realize, I think, that you could do that. And the tips for those would be like our major guideline is to present your opinion on it, to make arguments for or against, but if you can include some data or some other evidence to support your opinion. And then if you can offer a solution and say why. Those are the main three tips, but just spreading the word too, that you can write in about the issues or the legislators and especially at campaign time, you can write in and say, I support this candidate because such and such. And those letters will get in because that we try to, especially around the election season, get local opinions in there.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I have just a couple more questions, so I want to remind the people that are on as the audience. If I think we took care of all the questions that were in the chat box. If you have any other questions for Deborah, please get them in the chat box in the next couple minutes, so we can make sure we take advantage of her expertise and her time today. Because like for me, this is a super interesting topic. But you talked a little bit about the process. I had asked you if you were the final arbiter. So they go to you and you do the first selection, and then it goes, you said, to the copy desk?
Yes, copy editors. And they're actually, the copy desk, we have 3 or 4 editors that have been doing it for quite a while. So they're pretty strong, and they'll catch anything I miss initially. And then the third step is the editorial page editor and his assistant they proof the whole page actually. And so they'll check the letters a third time.
Okay, so they wouldn't necessarily know things that you had cut from the ones that were submitted, right? So you do have a significant amount of power, Deborah, right?
It's funny because they've never asked to see the mailbox. And I said, I would be glad to show you what I receive. And I do, yes, I get to choose which ones that come in get to be published. But I'm willing to really, let them do that. They don't want to, I think. They're like, you have so many to deal with. But you're right. And because I've done it like 5 years now. And in the beginning, it was really slow and difficult because I didn't know the writers. I didn't know the kind of protocol. And but now, because I've done it, it becomes a little bit more, a little less time consuming. But, sometimes I could tell from reading the first sentence whether a letter will make it or not. Sometimes I can tell by who's writing it. And then sometimes, I go through each one of them, but yeah, it's my decision. And sometimes they'll say, well, did you receive any letters on the other side? I go, no, I didn't, but I'd be glad to let you look in the file to see. But they understand that sometimes, letters are one-sided that I receive, but it's up to me to check them first and to go through the mailbox every day.
Well, I have to believe that you're just a very trusted person, and you said you've been doing this for 5 years, so they know you use good judgment. Do you ever have to and I have to do this to myself a lot, so I probably would not be very good at this job, kind of check your own personal
Yes, I do all the time. We really, we have to be nonpartisan and objective. Editorial has to be as well in their columns and editorials. That's the hardest part. That is the hardest part, because we all have opinions and we all have our political preferences. But I have to keep that totally out of checking the letters. And so, I'll run letters I don't agree with. And it seems like maybe some people may think, oh, she's running all the liberal letters. That's only because what we receive, not because I have a preference for them. I can't have a preference for either side.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we face with the League of Women Voters, because we are a nonpartisan organization, but oftentimes our positions on issues, favor one party over the other. And so you do get that, and I don't want to say attack, from people saying that you're really not nonpartisan. I mean, that would be silly that would say you were neutral on every single topic.
Try to. Well, it's interesting because remember we had that incident in Richardson where with the candidate forum, because for candidate forums, you of course invite all the candidates, right? And so many of the Republicans weren't appearing. And so they had to cancel their forum because they couldn't be nonpartisan, not having both sides. And so that I understand that issue totally. And that's what I face too, is trying to be nonpartisan when you may not have one or from the other side as much as the other side. So that's a big issue.
Yeah. fear that becomes a strategy to silence, sometimes one particular viewpoint. If you're not hearing from both sides, that means nobody can say anything. So in effect, it's really taking away somebody's voice, right? Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, well, this is the final question that I have. So, the chat's still open if anybody wants to add a question, but we're getting close to our 1 o'clock time. But I wondered if there was any letter that significantly changed your opinion on a particular issue.
Yes, there have been some that presented another side to an issue that I didn't see before. And I think some of them have the issues that I've covered are, well, I haven't changed my opinion. I'm trying to think now. Was that on your list? I forgot to check.
It was the very last question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I must have skipped that. I think when someone just writes an effective letter that's different from what I believe, it will make me think twice. And that makes me think I have to listen to both sides. I often, I will, if I do the letters too quickly, I'll choose a letter that, maybe, wait, we should choose another letter that presents another side to this. And so they have been, what the keys to doing that are just having a good opinion about something, but having the background to present data about it, the background on it, and it'll make you think twice, just like a column will. You say, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. I'm trying to think of the issues that have done that for me, but I think mostly they have been on elections, trying to, some of the voter rights issues, some of them have said, well, these laws that have passed, for initially may disagree with them, but they point why they're passed. And so then I say, oh, well, they have a point there, and maybe that's worth considering or looking into or following up on more. And so some on elections, the election letters, the voting rights issues, not on some other issues like, well, immigration too. I think I've seen both sides. And so those are tough because you have strong opinions. And the gun control, I know the majority of those letters have always been for gun control. Those who are not for it don't write as often, but they do write, and they will say, we believe in the Second Amendment, and we want to protect ourselves. So it doesn't, overall the letters that present both sides make me think about how two sides deserve to be heard. The problem we have now is that they won't come together. And if they could come together, more can be accomplished. But I think there's thought-provoking letters from both sides. And it doesn't change my opinion totally, but it makes me think differently and possibly rethink a few issues on the other side. So it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, it maybe didn't change my overall view of it, but if I didn't ever have an experience that somebody else had, and they said, well, this happened to me in relationship to that particular issue, and I hadn't had that personal experience, and I say, well, now I see where that viewpoint came from, or how we were raised, or where we were raised, makes such a huge difference. And that's why I just want to go back before we close to the importance of staying connected to your local community by reading the paper. Like I said, I don't think there's been a time in my adult life, and my adult life is fairly advanced, where I haven't had a subscription to a local paper, no matter what I thought about it, because I would never say, oh, I'm canceling my subscription because I don't, like what your particular endorsement was. But, it's really important to listen to other people's point of view. And I'm grateful that there's someone like you that's sorting through all of those and giving us a sampling of what our neighbors think. And I do want to challenge the people that are on the call today and the people that'll be viewing the program later to, take a stab at it. And it's probably pretty exciting to see your name in print. So we have a lot of issues that we're going to be supporting. throughout the legislative process. And we do get alerts from our organization that says, hey, here's some talking points you can use. So we even get help doing that. So hopefully you will see some letters from League of Women Voters folks coming up very
Good.
soon.
I will look for them. One other thing I might mention is the Dallas Morning News is one of the few papers that runs as many letters as they do, because a lot of other papers only run 3 or 4 per day. And to give me the opportunity to do a 3 cheers feature is something that's unusual. And also the 3P topic letters. So there was a point, when I'd worked for 3 editors, and the middle editor, he was almost going to stop the letters, but put them in another area or something. And so there was a chance we were going to lose this. And thank goodness, saner heads prevailed, and they kept the letters as they are, as they have been, having almost a full column every day, and then the 2 extra features. So they should get credit for that, because it's not often in all newspapers.
Right. Well, that's really good to know, that saying you don't know what you got till it's gone, right?
Right.
So we appreciate that very much. Do you think there's anything else I missed? Anything else you wanted to share before we close?
I was trying to think if I told you about all the tips for writing, but I wanted to mention, that how we do have many from the same writers. There was a professional letter writer from California who wrote every day, and every so often I would run him because he was good, but he passed away, so we don't run him anymore. But also, if you let me see here, if you I had something that I thought, sometimes we do run out-of-state letters. So there's sometimes a connection in the sense the person may have lived here, or they have just a connection to Dallas, or they we have the opportunity. I mean, I have the authority actually to run letters from out of state, but the local letters take preference. And so they shouldn't be they won't run that often, but every so often you will see a letter from California or Australia. There's a person from Australia, Melbourne, Australia, who writes every day, Dennis Fitzgerald. And I feel like he writes so often, if there's a good one that stands out, I'll give him a chance to be published. But basically, we prefer, basically the local writers are take precedence always. And let's see, that's about it, I think.
Is the Australian gentleman, I think you said it was gentleman, did he used to live in Texas?
No, I asked him once why, and he said, I just heard the Morning News is a good paper and I like to express my opinion. And I don't think he writes to others, because we really cannot run letters that are sent out in mass to newspapers. And there was somebody from the University of Texas in Austin who did that, and his letters were so good. And then I thought, well, we can't, because he sends them to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and so they can't. They really should be just to the one newspaper. That's one of our rules. So we try to monitor that. Sometimes it's not hard to monitor. But I asked him why he wrote, and he said he just liked the Dallas Morning News. That's
great. Well, I can see, with the size of Texas and its booming population and everything, and the impact that Texas will have on national politics, that sometimes, our congressional delegation can influence legislation that maybe people across the country agree or disagree with. So I can see where that might even become a bigger issue.
Yeah, the editor, he doesn't like a lot of the letters that are on national politics, but that's so much of it in our newspaper now. He really loves the local letters. So I try as much as I can to run those when we get them. But yes, because of the national issues and Texas being involved, like especially with sending immigrants to other cities, you get letters from, Philadelphia or New York, that will generate letters from other states. Right.
Right. Well, we'll look forward to reading more. And as I said, we will challenge our organization to get letters out about our local priorities. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. It was really It was really an engaging, exciting conversation. We'll be publishing today's program on our YouTube channel for future viewing, and we will provide a link to that on our website, lwvcolin.org. If there's anyone on the call today that has not already joined our league, you can also do that on our website. And in addition, we ask you to please sign up for our newsletters so that you have up-to-date information on important programs, because we'll continue to have these educational programs, and on election information. We do have municipal and school board elections coming up in May, and we will be doing forums, and we really want you to be an informed voter. So thank you to everyone who participated in today's program, and hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here, Deborah.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. And I hope people write letters.
Thank you.
Your members.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you very much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.